Some they call it functional alcoholism, but if you know anything about Ben, he's got vision with precision, microphones and a tinkle of derision. You're about to hear what beer can be. It's time for Barley and Me.
Welcome to Barley and Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. We're here today in Fort Collins, Colorado. I just keep being not at home, I guess. You get a shot and you're like, I'm free to the world. It's like exactly what we do. So I'm here today at Horse Dragon Brewing in Fort Collins. With me today, I've got Tim Cochran.
Hey there. How's it going, Ben? Good to meet you.
Thank you so much. One of the owners of Horse Dragon, of course, and the lovely Carol Cochran as well.
Yep. I'm one of the owners. And the bank is the third, and they're not here today.
Yeah, not invited to the table. They've got enough say. And our special guest today from Troubadour Maltings, we've got Chris Schooley.
Hello.
And Steve Clark.
Hey, nice to be here.
Thank you guys so much for doing this.
Yeah,
this
of course.
Is crazy.
Absolutely.
We're going to just talk about whatever comes up, I guess. Like I said, it's been a while since I've done one of these live ones up until now, so my conversational flow has been terrible. So I apologize in advance. But I'll start with my classic opener. And it's going to be a weird answer. Usually it's a very lighthearted, fun question, but we're in the thing. So how's business here at Horse and Dragon?
It's definitely depends on if we're looking back or looking forward, right? So the last, we're happy to see 2020 go. And I think it's pretty interesting. It was a chance for us to kind of revisit sort of how we approach everything. And I mean, definitely the business itself, if I'm not, analytical. Our on-premise business is still tiny compared to what it was, and then our tasting room, which is another leg, is actually doing okay with outdoor seating, and people in Colorado are very respectful, at least northern, about respecting all the issues of distance and masks and things like that. And then our off-premise business is bigger than we thought it would be. So
really.
But it's still a small portion of the total, right? So I was delivering 2 kegs today, this morning on Saturday, just because I'm so happy to be delivering kegs.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's just so nice to see accounts that are opening up in a safe way and getting things done. So
yeah, it's been a problem. Did you guys have to make any big changes in how you operated your business in order to do this?
Sure, yeah, we made some pretty massive changes. I think, like everyone, of course when we opened, we focused largely on being a small brewery that had a distribution footprint. So we were working really hard to build up restaurant and bar partners and trying to help promote them. And we had very limited taproom hours. We wanted to operate a little bit like the typical Northern California winery, where people might visit if they had tried your product out and about and it tweaked their interest. Mm-hmm. They would come up, they want to see where it's made, have a tour. But then we wanted them to go out to bars and restaurants in Fort Collins and enjoy the whole Fort Collins vibe and hopefully have our product there after sampling it here. And so that was our initial model. And then, of course, 100% of those businesses closed overnight on March 17th last year, or 16th, I guess it was, the day before St. Patrick's Day.
Horrible day.
Which is just so hard for them. It's been just as hard as this year has been for us, a lot worse for those partners. And watching them navigate through it it's been hard to watch. But a bunch of them have made it through. Bless them. And of course, so our business, we ended up destroying a fair amount of beer. Well, not destroying it. We ended up composting it with a bunch of different composters. But that was painful because that's a product that you've put your heart and soul and their awesome grain into, and the bugs in the compost loved it. But it wasn't really how we wanted that beer to go. But we knew that by the time things reopened, it wouldn't be the freshest, best representation of the beer that we wanted out there. So we then ramped our production way down and went largely to cans, which were difficult to come by and at our size, very expensive. We're spending about 34 cents a 12-ounce can as opposed to 9.9 if we could afford to order a whole truckload of one SKU printed. Yeah. So that's a pretty big difference per case in packaging cost, and certainly different than the cost of kegs. But that's what kept our lights on, really. And the people that came in or went to liquor stores and bought those 6-packs kept us able to pay the few people who remained with us over the course of the pandemic. So thank goodness for that.
And there was definitely a lot of folks who shifted to more packaging after the pandemic. But one of the interesting things, and probably random, just our luck is a lot of our core customers at Troubadour had began, canning about a year prior before the shutdown. And because of that, obviously there was the shutdown and the slowdown right up front. But once people kind of got back into, getting everything in a container again, it stayed pretty steady, this way. But I think, both Tim and Carol make a really great point in terms of just like that shifting and the challenge in and of itself of being shut down and not being able to serve people, and especially for folks like Tim and Carol and ourselves who are so community minded, who are so about like bringing everybody to the table and having that shared experience. Such a difficult year, but at the same time, on the optimistic glass, a little more than half full kind of viewpoint, being in agriculture, try to be an optimist. But I think there was a lot of interesting opportunities for new service models throughout craft beer that I was really interested to see, and just like capturing the audience in a different way rather than the traditional belly up to the bar kind of way that it can turn into on a busy Saturday or whatever. And so people are just crowded up there by the register, and it becomes quick decisions and transactions rather than people sitting and looking over your menu and getting to know some of the special things you do. And really even just, looking at a brewery's menu, like paints such a picture. If you're in a rush and there's a line behind you, you're going to order what right? Mm-hmm. Because you're just trying to get something and get out of the way. Whereas if you get an opportunity to sit and think about it and read something, like before you even have that sip of beer, you can see like, oh, this brewery is doing, either heavily this style, or they're really diverse, or they're paying attention to this in the way they describe their beer. And I feel like there's a really cool opportunity to capture people's attention in a different way.
Yeah. So has there been a big change at Troubadour Maltings as far as how business has come in as breweries pivoted? Like there was an initial concern, at least when I was in Sacramento, that, those like secondary companies that you don't think about when you're like, oh, breweries are going to have problems with production. You're thinking all the providers of ingredients might also struggle. But I think enough breweries made the pivot to figure out how to stay at least pretty good. But how did that affect you guys?
A couple interesting things from our perspective is we were about 4 months into a expansion, pretty large expansion at the time. So, but at the same time, like right when the big shutdown happened and everything slowed down was right when we were kind of in a place where we were going to have to shut down production to switch out the new equipment and everything. So the timing actually, we really lucked out in that regard. And we were down for a couple weeks as far as production goes. And we definitely missed out on some orders because of that. But definitely the impact was minimized by everybody being slower. But like I was saying earlier, I think with a lot of folks switching to packaging, that really kept things fairly steady once that kind of came, after the end of April, and people were kind of pivoting and figuring out what they could do, things started, steadily picking back up again. And I also think, we do a lot of work with distilleries as well. And, a lot of their business is time. So they just made a lot more liquid and put it in a lot more barrels, which was really helpful. But I think, one of the other things, and, when we opened Troubadour, there were maybe 8 or 9 other outfits of our size across the country who were doing craft malt at the time. And now there's over 70 in operation, craft maltsters, and growing. And so what we heard from our craft malt community and what we experienced ourselves really was a lot of brewers looked even more inwardly towards local suppliers. Nice. Because I think everybody's mindset was like, how do we support local business? Not just in the feel good, like support local kind of way, but realizing like, hey, my uncle owns this shop downtown, or my cousin works for this company, or my friend, all my friends work, for these other folks. Everybody really was focused on that. Or I work for somebody who's closed down. Like, how do I, position myself to help my friends out, but also knowing that then there's going to be something down the road for that. And I think that had a major impact on the value that other small businesses put in their suppliers, and being able to access that material, knowing that, it was coming from right down the road or whatever.
And Chris and Steve have been saying this since the very beginning of Troubadour. And Chris actually dripped this on me for more than a year before I finally got the concept. Like before I finally was like, oh, I actually know the farmer that grew this grain. And I can visit his farm and I can talk to his son and, serve them a beer. And that the value of that, your supply chain being that contracted is great, not just in a greenhouse gas emissions and transport kind of way, but also in a, this is your community. These are people who, And you've been evangelists for that from the very beginning. And it's funny because I do feel that way, but it took me a long time to grasp it in the malting world, And when we opened in 2014, May, the same weekend, I think, right? May 1st, but the year later, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in May of 2014, there were no craft maltsters in northern Colorado or southern Wyoming. And now there are 3 within 90 miles of us, Well, you guys within 2 blocks.
And Grouse as well with
And
sure.
yes.
They'd been there.
I should always remember them, but we don't usually do gluten-free stuff, so we're not as connected. We have ordered from them a couple of different grains, but you're
Grouse
right. Yeah, so that's 4.
Yeah, Grouse is a gluten-free maltster just north of here in Wellington.
Oh,
so.
wow.
Yeah. And they've been around for a bit.
And we
longer.
actually all Steve and I started putting together the concept with Troubadour with Twyla Souls, the owner of Grouse.
She's great.
And then she wanted to focus more on the gluten-free aspect of things. And for a while, we actually were trying to figure out how to do it all together. And that would have been pretty difficult since the entirety of our business is gluten.
Right. And so there's cross-contamination.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's a nice
Exactly.
division, though. It's
Yeah,
a nice,
exactly.
It's a pretty clear delineation, and so she supplies nationally for
Exactly.
gluten-free malts.
it would have been a disaster to go together, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be able to trust it. Because
Or separate facilities. And
Right. Steve, the scientist, says we would have to test all the time.
I will say, though, it was great because the very first batch of malt that we made, and Chris and I didn't know what we were doing. Well,
we baked all the gluten out. It
we
became
were
gluten-free.
working on it. But
they're doing that.
Tim and Carol showed up, and they're in there with us in the bin, shoveling out the malts. It was a fabulous day. I don't know if we actually made any beer with it, but we were learning what we were doing.
Yeah.
And you brought a couple pitchers of beer, and it was, so kind of coming back to the community, and we're really focused on kind of transparency and letting everybody see how the whole supply chain works in our industry. And Tim and Carol have been great, ambassadors as well, kind of promoting.
I think you're very generous to say that.
So
but I will say, like, the combination of the scientists who understands designing pharmaceuticals and the coffee roaster who's internationally acclaimed. I have a very funny story about Chris being recognized when we were doing a happy hour on an account.
It was pretty funny.
From a guy in Texas who was bringing his daughter to school.
Are you Chris Schooley? Can I get a picture with you? My friends are
My
never going to
coffee
believe
friends
that
are
I
never
never
gonna
going to believe
believe
I met you. Yeah, so
The
cool.
coffee paparazzi, you guys, you don't even
It was
know.
cool,
It's
dude.
like
It was cool to watch.
my whole life.
And the guy.
That's why I walk around in masks before COVID, I had to walk around in
The guy
masks.
was like, so my daughter's going to go to Colorado State because I want to come up here and meet you and hang out with you.
And then
real.
I'm dropping
it
her
was
off,
real.
and here you are at this restaurant. But anyway, it was very funny. But I will say the combination, I don't know a ton about malting, but what I do know, the combination is fantastic, right? Because you can design it and germinate it to exactly the point chemically where you want it. And you can play the artist in the roasting and get the flavors. It's a
good
fantastic
combo.
combination.
Yeah. Troubadour is
We
amazing.
were pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
To find each other. Yeah.
I have a comedian friend who's a musician and also a coffee guy. He's like, he has this joke about, he's like, I was elected as the 3rd best barista on the West Coast. So I'm keeping up my family tradition of being no big deal.
I don't know. It's a big deal.
Yeah, but it's like that's an entire the part of America where coffee's like known to come from, and he's the top 5 guy.
Yeah.
He's like, but nobody really cares. But people seriously, they know
Some
from
people
all-
really
though,
care.
I mean, there's something like
such a weird thing.
It's super funny and whatnot, but there's something to the whole idea of being coffee famous or beer famous or whatever. Like one of the things that kind of sparked some of our ideas around Troubadour in the first place, while I was working in coffee, was, specialty coffee at the time was doing a lot of work trying to figure out who the specialty coffee customer was. Like working with all these groups and analyst groups, like looking at taking surveys, and it's like, and all the numbers came back like it's everybody. It's not like one type of person. It's impossible to find. But there's something that clicked with me doing a lot of collaborations with brewers over the years as a coffee roaster. It's like, well, how many people work in craft beer, versus how many people work in specialty coffee? Like a couple 100,000, right? Nationally.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it sparked me. It's like, well, we already know that when we get together, we speak the same language in so many ways, and we're the same kind of people. Like we're generally, either chemists or failed liberal arts majors who didn't become the writers that we wanted to be or whatever.
Is that what the table is?
That's the thing, yeah.
Nice.
I am not
writing.
at that table.
Oh, I actually just didn't
Carol's
go
a
to
scientist.
school. But,
Right. I made it a year. But
And look at you now.
look at me now. I'm
Professional.
hemorrhaging money doing podcasts.
Hemorrhaging money is a phrase I used often in our
understand
first
this.
year of
Yes.
business.
How do you stop the bleeding?
business.
You stop doing it.
Yeah, just don't do it
It's
anymore.
but then you don't have any blood, so what's the point? And it's the whole thing.
But I mean, the idea being like, well, instead of trying to pigeonhole who that customer is, find a group like people who work in craft beer and figure out how do we deliver the message of specialty coffee to people in craft beer. Because everybody who works in craft beer should be a specialty coffee drinker. And everybody who works in specialty coffee should be a craft beer drinker.
Absolutely.
Because we're the same people, just ended up applying
products,
to different
yeah.
companies,
And you
right?
care about flavor,
Different
and you care
times
about
of
the
day.
experience.
Yeah, different times of
Exactly. And the crossover is brilliant.
yeah,
the
'cause-
favors you could pay each other are immaculate.
Because when you're brewing, it's 4 a.m. What do you need? Coffee. Exactly. After a long day of serving people, I need my coffee latte at 183 degrees. If it's 184, I'll know. You need a beer. So it's...
when you're there.
But being coffee famous or beer famous or whatever, which sounds silly, I think there's also those opportunities to pivot that into how do I then work with these other craft industries, and it's an easy audience. I don't have to spend half the time convincing you that it's worth knowing where your raw materials come from. You already
just nod
have
your
bought
head.
into that.
I'm so sorry you probably spent half your time convincing me of that. But I'm on
That's
board.
good, though.
You're on board. You're fully on board. But to your point, you're passionate about craft beer.
I believed in the community.
Oh, yeah.
But what I didn't get was the, well, I love that what you're trying to develop is the terroir of beer, right? Which definitely, if your product is any indication, exists.
Sure.
And so that's such an exciting thing to be a tiny part of, And that it took me a while to comprehend the community part, and as soon as you introduced me to the Arnishes, I was like, yes, we need to figure out how to do this. But
We still have people asking us how our hops business is.
Yeah. Frequently.
Right.
Oh, yeah? They're just confused about
So
what's
the malt isn't quite as sexy, right?
Yeah,
not-
it's true.
But it's
nowhere
the
near.
backbone of what's going
The
on.
malt backbone
Yeah.
is a very popular phrase.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many attributes.
It's hard to make malt sexy when we're only doing podcasts. We really need a video medium so that
Yeah.
we
Okay.
can start to translate how sexy malt is.
But I will say, if you give me a handful of malt versus a handful of hops to gnaw on during this podcast,
Well, yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm taking the
the malt,
grains
easy.
every time.
Yeah, delicious.
So obviously you've got to call the series. I'm killing it, and
Well, and we're going to make a calendar too.
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, honestly,
I
though,
cannot wait.
one of the best things that they have at Troubadour, I think, and that you're probably influencing a lot of these new craft maltsters on is branding, right? That's what the hops guys are really good at.
yeah.
Oh, Citra. I'm like, well, what's Citra? Well, it tastes a little bit like Mosaic, but it's not, if you want to use names, you need to have names to describe things. I think this is your proper nouns idea, right? Is that you have to have specific names around things rather than caramel malt. Everybody goes, well, what kind? What kind of caramel malt? You're like, no, but they have a name for their one caramel malt that's this way, and then another one for this one.
It's going to provide this.
Yeah, if you
character.
want
This
to,
character,
I mean,
yeah.
exactly, and
So
that's
the branding
kind of,
that you guys are killing it, I think. And that-
Troubadour. We lucked into the name just being, musical storytellers, but it created, a vocabulary for us to choose from to name our products, but also just that idea of, oh, well, we want our products to add character, and if you want that character to be an interesting character, then it has to be a name that you remember
it has to
throughout
be
the rest of
branded.
the story,
Yeah.
right? So just like Galaxy or
Right.
Comet
Can't
or
be,
whatever, any
yeah.
of these things.
Can't be pale malt number 7.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly.
so it's-
The most unmemorable names.
Right. So it has, the beauty of these guys is they're building that culture. It'll take time to build across a larger audience,
Well,
but within your customer base, we get it, right? We're like, can I get Serenade? I need Serenade. How much Serenade do you have?
And then you have customers that then incorporate those
into the
product
names.
names into the names of the beer, just
Or-
like with
or the
the
descriptions
hops or the descriptions as well. And we've definitely seen it where those beers getting reviewed that then list the malt on the can, the reviewer mentions, oh, and they use this malt, and we could really notice how it's different from other things. And I mean, that's power of suggestion, but amen to that. I mean, that's half a craft business, right. Is the power of suggestion.
Yeah. Speaking of naming conventions, Horse and Dragon, where'd it come from?
Well, we lived in Asia for 10 years.
Okay.
And so the dragon is a symbol across the region in many of the cultures and countries of strength and good luck and power, I suppose. And then and so we wanted to reflect that, but also we live in the American West, and the west of all of the Americas. The horse is a symbol of kind of history and hard work and getting things done. And so we wanted to kind of reflect the balance of those two things in our name. We also loved going to pubs all over the world.
British pub naming convention.
British pubs. We've been
Single-syllable, double-syllable animals.
Right. We've been in a couple of pubs animals. Around the world in a bunch of countries. Yeah, the Pig and Whistle, one of the favorite ones in Taiwan. And so we thought it had a nice ring to it a bit. Is that
and
it?
You're the horse and I'm the real reason is he's you're the horse and I'm the dragon in the Chinese zodiac.
Beautiful.
Like that's why it was on the list in the first.
Right. That's how I got it on the list. We're like,
but we're like, we like it for these other reasons as well.
So it's still an honoring you, but it's also honoring the cultures you're involved in.
Right. Without being
having our name on it, which is not so fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's where it came from.
Now, Chris, I've been wandering around, and people have told me that there's this thing you have that you probably don't want to talk about, or you very much want to talk about. I'm not clear which way it goes.
I cannot wait to hear.
I know.
I was told to ask you about your Ferrari.
Oh, yes. So we recently purchased a roaster, and that was one of our reasons for starting Troubadour in the first place, was looking at there is a specific malt product that hardly anybody else was doing in North America outside of the major big names. And that was my background. And so we were really picky with, our malting equipment, we designed from the ground up and worked with local artisans to build, and local other small HVAC businesses and whatever to build from the ground up. But they're unique works of art. Our primary welder who built those malting machines is a sculptor. And so now he made these big giant color blocks, which I always joke are his Rothkos, right? It's just big blocks of color. But for the roaster, we were really particular, and for good reason. While in both products you're engaging in sugar browning reactions, to get your final result, both coffee and malt, separate from, say, majority of spices or cacao, where you're roasting to dry it out primarily, and you're not engaging in browning reactions in the roasting of those products. Even though you're kind of approaching the products in a similar way, you still have to be a lot more careful, because with coffee, it's a very dense product, and so you use a lot of high intense heat, and it's a very fast roast. But so you can have more definitely have more kind of heat and effluent from the heat source through the roasting chamber that won't impact the final quality. And also with coffee, your brew time is maybe a couple minutes, so you're not going to extract anything that it might absorb. But the other side of that is with malts, it's like a couple hours of a roast. And this is a really long answer to a short question, but that's what you came for. So.
Yep, it's true. We got to get this time anyway. Somehow.
Roasting.
It's awesome. This is the beauty of it's the meld of coffee.
I'm learning stuff, so I'm happy to be here.
Right.
But so roasting grains is it's a much more delicate material, so it's a much longer process. And because the extraction of your grain, you're going to have that at extraction temperatures for an hour or more. So anything that it does absorb is going to be pulled out of it again. So you can't just put malt in a coffee roaster, because it will absorb effluent from the gas, and that will show up in your beer, and that will actually not be
Brewers
very good.
don't want that.
No, they don't want that.
But coffee, we want that in coffee.
So there are a couple models of roaster out there. Some old vintage, primarily Godhut and Bart are the two manufacturers who make this offset combustion for coffee roasting that does work with grain. So we were looking at some of those vintage machines. But again, with a vintage machine, you then have to find somebody who can machine new parts for you, because you're not getting that new parts off of the Mopar shelf or something. So we found this. So Bueller introduced this new roaster The body and the main technology behind this roaster was they were using it as a cacao roaster in East Africa and India, I believe. And then they were like, oh, this is perfect with the the indirect combustion and the way the roasting chamber is actually a vacuum. There's no fluid transfer, meaning there's no hot air moving through the product. It's all radiant and conductive transfer.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful roaster. It's a small thing. But so we got it installed right before the Maltsters convention last year. And everybody, all the Maltsters were looking at it. And they were like, well, damn, Chris and Steve, you guys bought a Cadillac roaster. And we took them around the back to show them the blowers on the roaster. And we were like, no, we didn't buy a Cadillac. We bought a fucking Ferrari. And the blowers are...
Anyone can buy a Cadillac.
Yeah, that's right. That's off the shelf.
The blowers are manufactured by Ferrari.
Why
they're lousy? Why they're loud as hell.
Loud, yeah.
Oh, we got
cool,
new
though.
beers. Let's cheers it up.
Cheers.
But I will say, just to
Timing.
give the more scientific, succinct answer. So the roasting technology, malting technology has been around for centuries, right? I mean, it's been going on. But when we came into malting, people were malting football fields of grain, right?
Right.
And there's no way, as a craft maltster and trying to serve a community that's much smaller, we didn't need to make that much, nor could we mortgage our houses enough to build that. So we actually had to design a malting system that didn't exist yet. So there were no equipment manufacturers making malting systems at our scale, which is why we designed it. The roasting industry is kind of the other way around. There's so many small scale roasters out there. Every town's got their little coffee roasters doing 10 or 20 pounds at a time. And so there we were almost going in the opposite direction. And so the technology existed, and we did not want to go start roasting malts by taking a 55-gallon barrel drum and a flamethrower and turning it around, which is what some people were doing, right?
Yeah.
So it exists. We can pull it off. Chris has got 15 years in the industry doing this, so that made complete sense. On the flip side, making malt, we had to kind of roll up our sleeves and figure out how do we reverse engineer the football field, down to something we can do 5 or 10 tons at a time. So it's kind of where we ended up.
Well, and I wonder about the interesting thing, like if you create a brand that works, this has happened in the brewing industry over and over, right? Like create a brand that works, that takes off or whatever, has a special characteristic, whatever it might be, some sort of intangible associated with it that drives the market. And then a huge company comes and says, we want to reproduce this on a mass scale. Like this is the way I feel about our brewing system all the time. It's 15 barrels. I'm like, you can scale it up if you want, but it's not going to be the same, like
absolutely.
it's going to, So
that scalability
you're
is-
creating your own niche,
Product
really.
segment.
But-
When Steve was talking, it reminds me of Doug Odell, right? When he first came here, so he's 30 years in plus, and when he came to our system, he's always like, you guys just can go to the internet and buy these off the rack. Really, pretty much. We had to build our own stuff, which is exactly what you guys did. So you're the Odells of malting,
which is what actually got
later.
Doug really excited. He would come by and check us out and be like, "What's going on here?" And he was like, you guys are going to have a really hard time selling malts for double the price.
Yeah, out the
and we're
back
like,
of your truck,
but
like
we
I did.
custom built. We custom built the equipment, and we're using these locally grown grains, and we're going to showcase things, and our malt's going to taste different. And you saw the lights behind his eyes, and he's like,
I get it.
He's like, God damn it, that's my whole business pitch.
That's what
he just gave me my whole business pitch.
Yeah, he did it. Yeah, he did it 30 plus years ago
and made it work. Too,
yeah, and it's killing it.
But that scalability is huge because it's something that outside of some small producers in the UK or Europe, where they had their own in-house operations, nobody had tasted, anything really had seen malts to your point earlier about what you knew about malts in getting into brewing. It's like, oh, it's sugar and it's this ingredient and it serves this purpose. And predominantly, especially in North America, the breeding of barley for brewing has been driven towards extract and away from flavor because the people on the AMBA certification board have all been people at large macro breweries who are trying to brew super pale yellow fizzy beer. So they don't want barley.
And efficiency is called, well, it's an interesting thing because efficiency is different depending on what you want out of the final product, right? But like the big business beer definition of efficiency is as much sugar as I can get out of there so that I can...
For as cheap as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So knowing that there was a market for craft beer, it predicates that there is a market for craft malt.
Right.
And
what's
that
the
doing things in small batch. And we've seen this, especially with our original system, like with some of the specialties, as we scaled them up in that system, we just had a lot more difficulties achieving the same things that we were in our original smaller batches. So there's definitely something to that batch size with something. And even if you think it's something as basic as you're just trying to get as much, starch available in this seed, and you're just watching grass grow, which is literally what we're doing. But if you do it in the right way, you will absolutely taste that variety. You will absolutely taste where it was grown and what happened that year. I mean, in Colorado, the last 5 crop years, we've had such different moisture profiles through core parts of the growing season.
Okay.
And so you see different proteins as the results of that at stress at different times. Those proteins then equal what we can do in the malt house to either drive flavor, color, mouthfeel, all these things. And a lot of those grains, a lot of that barley would have been rejected by any of the large malt houses because they're not outfitted to work with high protein barleys, where a smaller system that we purposely built from the ground up, being super manual at first and then adding more control and measurement as we go, we now can dial in, as we're malting to get the best out of a product. So that's perfectly good barley that would have been wasted that now is tasty craft beer.
Well, the interesting part is that this parallels the growth of craft beer. And one of the things that we've been preached to by even larger craft breweries is not only was the barley crop made for extract for large fizzy yellow beers. So now there's an option, right? It's not just the variety, but it's also the fact that it's a craft product, right? Every year, this beer that I make seasonally, it might taste a little bit differently because my source is different, and I know that, and I know who it came from.
And also,
as
that's
opposed
kinda
to
cool.
as opposed to consistency.
Taste that.
Consistency is a word that's thrown around by large brewers, and they go, you have to be consistent, make your product the same every time. I'm like,
but
in fact, we're being more
the craft beer
crafty
drinkers
with these
don't want it. They're like, I don't want the same thing I had 3 days ago.
But consistency is still shoved down their throats.
I would still
as a virtuous thing is
now,
to be
granted,
the same.
if you're getting the same beer name, you want the same taste.
Good
but
call. Good
at the same time, if you're looking at seasonal beers that come around, just to pitch it, Sierra Nevada Celebration.
Right.
It's not the same every year.
Exactly.
Right.
But basically
Every year
what
it's
you're
going to be similar. But
and
not
Sierra's they're a great example of people who have looked towards their supply chain, and that celebration in particular is a manifestation of what's going on in their area every year. But to that point, that's that whole idea of consistency,
it's not what
consistency isn't necessarily enemy, but we want it to be consistently good and exciting.
Yes.
Yes, if you get the beer that's the same name, you want it to be as good as the next time, but you also kind of want it to be better.
Yeah.
And you can't be better if it's consistent.
Right.
And that's the thing. If I go to some of the finest restaurants in the world and I sit down and I have the same plate 2 times in a row,
it better not taste the same.
You hope it's better.
You'll be furious. You didn't learn anything.
You
didn't change
and
it.
think
try
about
something new.
Or there's something
instead of
blooming right now that
Pilsners
should be on top of that?
Instead of Pilsner beers just being light and crisp, and I mean the best Pilsner beers are light and crisp and refreshing
and grassy.
But
I need that grass.
But if every year that Pilsner kind of changes just a little bit, and really, because our Pilsner malt, our Pevek malt that just won silver at the Maltsters Cup this last year, our idea of a Pilsner malt is this is just our least kilned malt. Really? We're just kilning it up over DMS precursor temperatures, so that we're really trying to express, this is the clearest expression, the Pevek Pilsner malt is a clearest expression of just the grain itself, where it was grown and when it was grown and who grew it, rather than, we're still, manifesting that. It's a latent quality and not an intrinsic quality. And I think that that's important in craft to designate. But at the same time, like every year that PEVIC should be just a
Sure,
little bit
slightly
different.
This whole
in the best
liberal arts
possible way.
education is coming out. Do you hear this?
I heard the
Vocabulary.
word.
Artistry
That
and all that,
vocabulary
yeah.
was. I'm like, what is latent? And
But
a
when you're
latent
talking, it
characteristic.
reminds me of artisan cheesemakers. Also,
Yeah.
like their,
Oh, yeah.
their cheese varies. It's the same brand name.
I was just
but it
talking.
varies
Somebody's
based
like,
on-
"Oh, this guy left the beer industry to go into cheese." That's around here, right? There's a guy that left the beer industry and started doing cheese.
Muco Cheese Company right here. Yeah, that guy left New Belgium. The two of them. The woman
Yeah.
also. Yeah, the
They
couple.
were both in Belgium.
But anyway, it's very. Of course, they're grazing on something different, or the crop is going differently, or the atmosphere was different
Yeah.
during. Yeah.
Because global warming's real. And
Yes.
Oh, hello. Let's
That
slide
helps
that
too.
in there.
let's just slide that.
But when's the last
And
time
by
you
the way,
heard
we all got
climate change.
vaccinated.
I know, we're all
Right.
we're all good.
Which is why I'm like, we can
Science.
do these things.
But when's the last time you heard wine, grape growers say, "Oh, we're gonna blend our grapes year to year, so our wine tastes the same every year, year to year."
Yeah,
You have never heard
yeah.
that from a good vineyard.
Now
There
you
are
hear
some
but you hear the
trying to do
same
that.
The
thing
large
with,
ones,
with
yeah.
malt and barley.
Oh, 100%.
You have to blend your malt every year to make sure you hit the same.
Well, and that's what they
specifications.
do. Like, that's the key word, is they blend it.
Yeah.
It's not that all their processes in growing is
Perfect.
exactly this.
Yeah.
It's that they blend it to be this thing. So in that regard, it's homogenization,
Yeah.
which is kind of a friendly word for as
20th century.
basic as you can get,
Yeah.
right?
And I think for, this, like we were talking about, the seasonal changes because of how the world operates with the environment and everything like that. I assume when you're like, hey, this isn't the same as last year, you kind of inform your brewers, hey, this is the difference from last year. Like, great. Now I know what to do with this grain.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly how I'm going to change my recipe to fit that profile. And that's the key part about craft. That's what separates craft beer from big industry beer, is the fact that they're like nimble.
Yep.
They can adapt to
Exactly.
what you're
That
doing.
agility. And that's why knowing your supply chain is better, is more than just being able to put local on your board. It's being able to ask, what was the crop year like this year? Or when do we get into this, and how are things changing? When it's an actual conversation rather than just a buzzword, that's when actually cool things happen,
Yeah.
It's the best part about being 2 blocks from Steve and Chris, because he's like, oh man, it's raining today. So
It's a $1 billion storm, he said last year.
$1 billion storm, yeah. At this point in
barley
the growing
growers.
season, it's like, oh man, everything this is going to change what we do. Is that cool? We're like, yeah, we'll try it. Whatever. You try the new grain. That's no problem.
And,
Try the
and
malts.
be also being a couple blocks away. I mean, it's kind of with our transparency. We get as many taproom folks through the malt house as possible.
You bet.
Because we want, if somebody's serving a beer across the bar, somebody, and they ask, tell me about your ingredients, we want them to know. And not only that, we want them to say, oh, actually, we were where
went
the
there.
malt was made.
Yes, it's down
and,
there.
And they've got, some
Yeah.
Well, and we
vocabulary.
do actually, which I was going to ask you if we can steal some of your bags, your sample bags again. In the old days when we did tours, and we have done them now, but they have to be the same group of 10 and under and whatever. We always start with a sample of Troubadour malts, and we explain that you're around the corner, and explain that this is the first 2 steps of brewing is what you're doing right now. You're milling with your teeth, and then your saliva is starting the mash.
The hydration.
And
It's a protein rest at 90 degrees. At that 96 degrees.
98.2.
but you
Yeah.
can
98.6
taste the
degrees.
sugars coming out.
Oh, yeah, no,
and
and
your
everybody,
malts
they
are
start
so
chewing
delicious.
it, and then they go, oh, it's sweet.
And I always
that's the
say-
It
sugar.
tastes like breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
That's what Carol always says. I'd rather have this at a baseball
And
game.
then you
than a
have them
bag of
Then
like
Malts.
swallow
sunflower
fire.
seeds.
You're like, you're a fire swallower, right? So you just put it in there, you roast it up. You're like, that's what
We're
happens
only
when you
doing
get
the
a
first 2
286. And then,
It's the sparge where the blistering comes in.
But I mean, I always say
First 2 steps.
I would rather have this at a baseball game than sunflower seeds because
yeah.
it's so delicious, and you don't have to stick
Yeah.
the seeds out and whatever. It's so good.
so
But
good.
of course, then it would have to be a food product and FDA approved and whatever.
Yeah,
But I'm like, oh gosh, if I could buy this
And then
at
we
every gas
couldn't
station
turn
across
the
state
malt in our Daisy Dukes.
with bikinis on top.
If it was the 2 of you, that would be attractive. But others, maybe not.
Like Steve hit on a really important thing though, and we love getting together with brewers and working on recipes and talking about that and working with the owners to really understand that value through. But what Steve was saying, I think we don't want to miss that point, which is it's really on us as Troubadour to engage with that front of house staff and really help them to see that value. Like the best companies, the best brewers in the world who have great in-house training can help, instill the fact that there's something important there. But when the front of the house people can talk to us and have a conversation and ask us questions, that means they're going to translate that through to the customer. And now you have people riding their bikes around Fort Collins, stopping in for a pint of beer, and they can come to, Horse and Dragon or a lot of the other breweries in town. And the person working the bar is like, oh yeah, we use these local grain suppliers, Troubadour. And this beer in particular has some of this Serenade in it, which is really cool. And then, somebody's buying a $6-7 pint.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, this brewer, even the people working the bar, are fully invested in what's going into that. Versus you go to the next place down the road, maybe, and, that person now, that consumer is now like,
asking the question, what kind of malts do you use?
What kind of malts do you use? And they're like, I don't know, Canadian?
Two-row.
And it's like, are you still going to pay $6 to $7 for that beer?
Right.
When they've demonstrated that they're not as invested in what goes into that beer in the first place?
And that kind of goes to your double the price thing. Like, can craft support this? But craft brewers are willing to pay, or craft drinkers are willing to pay the price for that premium ingredient.
I don't think it should be $10 a pint.
But I absolutely do not think that is true.
No, I don't think we're there yet.
We can't even pay our people. We started taking tips during COVID, which we never did before. And their income, our servers, has basically doubled. And we could not raise our prices by $1 a pint to save our freaking lives. Because this is the standard. And you guys are so expensive already. Why would you? I'm like, we're trying to pay our people and you're not paying us tips. Now they're paying tips. They're happy to put $1.50 tip on a $5 pint.
It would never.
We said $8.50 for a pint instead of $7. No, people would
and
shit
we
their
could
pants.
explain till we were blue in the face that we were using
Shit
this
their
awesome
pants.
malt. At the moment, the story is not, and this is our fault too. Is not being told well enough that consumers are like, yes, I'm going to choose that over this. The brewers are currently eating that cost. But it makes the product taste so much better and that it's worth eating that cost.
And that's definitely my rose-colored glasses explanation of what the transaction should look like.
Be, Right.
But you're 100% right. And I think
And it's not going to be 100% of craft drinkers that are willing to do that. I'm in a bunch of beer groups I get why this beer is this expensive. You don't understand anything about the beer process and the world.
And the market that does and is willing to pay that, well.
They don't buy that much.
Okay, truly.
The home
there are
the
those
worst,
people out there. But it is not enough to support a business.
And the people that might understand it are homebrewers, and they're like, "Oh, this costs you 3 cents to make. Why are you charging me $7?" Because in their mind,
there's so many.
And we also have to buy a building, by the way, and we have equipment.
Exactly. No homebrewer ever incorporates their property tax or their mortgage payment into their homebrew bill.
Insurance,
we love them because their
health
love
insurance,
beer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a homebrewer, right? I mean, so I fall into that category because I'm like, man, it's expensive to buy beer when you're buying a pint, and you can make a bunch of gallons for that.
Yeah.
That consumer engagement piece and finding where that translation of the value really comes through is such an important part of all of this. And that's why I brought that up. The pie in the sky rose-colored glasses version of it is a consumer comes into Horse and Dragon, the front of house staff talks about using local suppliers, and everybody's really into that. But we're really not there yet. And so, maybe step one is, how to, like what I was saying at the very front end of this podcast, which was new ways to engage consumers and capturing people's eyes in a new way. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but.
And to be fair, I'm also coming from, California where, craft beer, people make a ton of money. There's so many tech people out there that are
a lot of consumers.
$9 is nothing for a beer. So I'm coming from a place where this is normal. And
$30 bombers in California.
That's
like
bombers,
10 years ago.
What are those?
I know, but 10 years ago in California, you could get nobody would blink at a $30 bomber out of the brewery or somewhere like that. And you couldn't do that in Colorado, even though I have this culture.
So that was my fault for my terrible California bias, and I apologize.
No, it's a challenge.
My sister lives there,
so I work on the Larimer County Workforce and Workforce Development.
It's all Colorado water.
It's like economic and workforce development. and Fort Collins is home to a lot of high tech companies, and the Innosphere is attracting all these amazing future thinkers, and so we're in manufacturing. That's our category, right? Is manufacturing. The average manufacturing wage in Larimer County, I want to say, is $72,000. We don't have one person. I can say this because Tim and I are not paying ourselves yet, 7 years in. So it's not like the owners are scraping money off the top of the company. In craft beer, there's not one person in our company, and all of our money is going back into equipment, product, and people, right? and community. Like we don't have a marketing budget, but we do donate.
Yeah.
Like that's where our marketing money goes is to charities, right? So $72,000 in craft beer world in Northern Colorado, that's just the average manufacturing wage in Larimer County, right? That seems at $7 a pint or $5 a pint seems an unachievable goal given the inputs required, this is the nut that we're currently trying to crack. This is what keeps me awake at night.
Absolutely.
And it's not Northern California, but it's still in that similar, the state that you guys were in 15 to 20 years ago with property values going crazy and attracting sort of high tech, investment and good jobs. This is one of the things on the workforce development board. They talk about how do we get more good jobs here? And I'm like, how do we get jobs like ours to be considered good? Like, how can we get,
We're making beer here.
We want our employees to feel like this is a good job,
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's just a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
In this industry.
No,
But the beauty is Carol's on it.
Yeah.
I'm not on. The beauty is I'm on it and just continually frustrated by it. Like I can't figure it out, but it does plague me. Like I want it. I want craft beer to be able to support its people because craft beer supports local.
Oh yeah.
More than community. Like we've never been to a craft brewery that does not contribute in some way to the community. And there's a bunch of other businesses I can say.
Oh yeah.
That do not.
And to your point, my wife being a school teacher, an elementary school teacher, she does every year when she was teaching kindergarten, they did a project where the class would break up into groups, teams, and each group would, make a community. They'd cut out shapes and whatever and make a map of town, right? And every year in every class and every group, every town that they made had a hospital and a grocery store and a school and a brewery.
Nice.
Because not just because they're here, but because everybody's
Connected
sister or aunt or uncle or everybody has somebody who's attached to their family who works in this industry. It is a part of this community, in a way that is ingrained through to our youth. And so, I think that's a beautiful point in terms of that
should support people in this community.
Kindergartners are like, that's an important job.
That's one of my favorite
Kindergartners think
stories.
that's an important job.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I also tell
love
you
to hear
Bob,
that.
who's out
That's
there,
so
like
cool.
Beer and Bikes Bob, who runs a beer and bike company here and also all over the world.
A tour company,
But anyway, Beer and Bikes Bob was out front, and the couple that he was taking around came back and looked at stainless, which I love people who want to see stainless because
That's cool.
And
spent a lot of time cleaning it.
It's because they can see the reflections in it.
Maybe. Or maybe just because they appreciate manufacturing in a clean space. But she said, we were talking about how much Tim and I like food and we want a beer that you want to have a second pint of and that pairs well with food, right? And so that's our goal. Like if someone orders a flight, that even if they're like, oh, I really don't like hops or sours aren't my thing or malty beers I don't like, which we sit on 2 of those campaigns. Like I'm not a huge fan of malty beers. Tim always tends toward malty rather than hoppy. But we want you to be able to do a full flight and say, I liked all of those beers. That one, I'm not going to,
I won't order more, but I liked them all. Or they were all good.
And the one that I loved, I want a second pint of. That's our goal, right? So we were talking about that, and I said, it's because we both love food so much and whatever. She said, we were at this, this is such a Fort Collins story. We were at this restaurant last night. This woman ordered a drink with nutmeg in it, and she goes, and so nutmeg made me turn my head. And so we got in this conversation like from 6 feet apart, and then today on the beer and bike tour, they stopped at a lemonade stand. It was the kids of that couple. The guy came out of the house. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so Fort Collins.
That's amazing.
Last night you met.
We met you guys last night at the restaurant.
And Tim bought $50 of lemonade.
Oh, you bet. Oh, no, support the lemonade stands.
Always.
Yeah.
I will always stop at a
always
lemonade
stop at
stand.
lemonade stand.
100%.
Entrepreneurs at age, and if they were in that kindergarten class, that makes me
Every
happier.
single time I'll stop.
Do you give them your feedback? Like, hey, it's a little bit too tart.
I usually don't. It's usually money. I'm like, I just say, make sure you're watching your costs.
Well, and Tim won't criticize the product.
No.
But he will give them business advice like,
so I'm like, where are you getting your supply? Are they
taxes?
charging you for it?
How about your cups? Did you pay for your cups? And I'm like, honey, they're 6.
So did your mom make this for you? You better pay her. You better pay her for your supply chain here.
Yeah.
And the mom's like, I know, right? I'm like, you should make sure $5 I'm giving you can't all go to you. You got to, make sure you pay for your
That's
lemonade.
your college fund right there. So
Take care of your people.
think hard
Yeah.
about how you're.
Are you looking at a second location? Remember, the cost will double.
Second location, right? You think it doesn't, but it does.
It's more of a gastropub kind of concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
My next concept, and the little brother's sitting there going, "No, I want to do hot dogs."
It's going to have pigs in a blanket.
But remember, that's a big overhead. Food's a big overhead. You're not going to sell every piece of food you buy. You're going to throw
That's right,
a lot
that's
of
right.
waste. So make
of
sure you
waste
know
and
that
margins
going
are
in.
tight.
Well, actually,
That's how
in
lemonade
seriousness,
works.
though,
The sister always says, "Lemonade's good." I got good margins on lemonade.
It's like, so this the sugar you're using. So is this like name brand sugar? Are you using a local honey maker? What are you doing?
Local apiary.
local,
Yeah.
local.
or beet
They go
sugar.
locally
Yeah,
made.
we
Or
have
beet sugar. Yeah.
That's
There's
Northern
a
Colorado.
huge sugar beet history here.
Sugar beets, yes.
Yeah.
That's
That
what
Colorado
got us.
Cola that we have is, or Rocky Mountain sodas, is all, he always says it's all Colorado products except for the bottle cap. So like everything
us
else
from
is
Mexico.
made in Colorado.
Wow.
And it's beet sugar.
Well, that sounds
Beet
like
sugar.
a business opportunity then.
Yeah.
Start making bottle caps.
He's always Steve's
I
gears.
was going to say, Steve just put in the roaster,
I don't
the
care if it's a
Ferrari,
fucking
and everything else
podcast.
is done.
I'm on it.
Now he's going to get on the bottle caps.
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer.
Serial
No-brainer.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Doable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're
No,
not constantly
he's
creating
literally
something,
a serial entrepreneur. I'm sorry.
Cereal.
I should not have made that point.
yeah, with the malting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the malto meal.
The number of tours we've come through that say this tastes like grape nuts. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said this tastes like grape nuts.
You can pay yourself.
The beauty is on the beer
That'd
and
be
bike tours
amazing.
in town in Fort Collins is that now, we have the
Troubadour on
malting.
it?
Yeah, it's
Nice.
on it. It's like, it's all flat. Everybody's like, oh, you guys are in Colorado, the mountains, high elevation. We're like, it's flat.
Yeah.
And you're
But
going
if you
like
wanna
2
challenge
blocks
yourself-
to get to the next one. I mean, you're not going 17 miles
Yeah.
between
I
breweries
say
like
all the
San
time,
Diego.
it is the best place to experience craft beer in the
Oh, yeah, for
United
sure.
States.
For
I really
sure.
do think
Easy.
it is. Because there's a lot of pressure. Like when you talk to Charlie next, like ask him about yeast. He's doing really cool things
All right.
with yeast over there
Ask him
because
about
he's like
chemicals.
a.
Ask him about chemistry.
He's
Everybody
a-
keeps telling me to ask the
That's
next
like a
person about
12-hour
things, so I'm very
It's like a
excited.
12-hour
That's the
discussion
community
with Charlie.
spirit here
Yeah.
in town, for sure.
He's doing. I love what he's doing.
Sad Panda. Watch out.
Oh, I've seen some Sad Panda
Have you had a
shirts.
Sad Panda yet?
I don't know what that is. I saw a shirt. Maybe I've
It's a
seen the shirt a few
light-bodied
times.
coffee stout. It could be a porter, like it's very light-bodied, and
wouldn't
it's.
sell
But
as
although,
Just saying.
although it's at 7%, so like it may be
Okay,
depending
so-
on if you're a traditional porterist, it might not qualify. Anyway, so it's a light-bodied coffee stout, and with cold brew coffee added, and vanilla and chocolate.
2 kinds of chocolate.
And so, it's a fantastic base stout, like a light stout. The base stout is fantastic. And then we pollute it with these other ingredients. It's
really good,
bless
though.
it.
Yeah.
It has it, and it's the invention of our first head brewer, Lindsay Cornish.
killed
and
it, yeah, it's amazing.
It's
Knocked it
a
out of the
delicious
park,
beer.
easy.
But I will say the base stout is even better than, although it didn't sell as well as the polluted stout.
Right.
So
People want things in their stout. Nobody wants. That's what I found. People don't want a regular stout anymore.
Yeah, it's strange.
Nobody wants an old school. Just hey, it's a stout.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Except
working
You
on
and me
that.
both.
One of the
obviously.
biggest things with that, and one of the big impetuses for getting into malting in the first place was realizing, like, oh, to make a stout, they roast the grains. This is a dark roast, but it's not the dark roast that I'm tasting that's off. It's the fact that I have no idea when this was roasted, and it was easily roasted more than a year ago.
Oh boy.
And so freshness in malts across the board is something that we haven't even touched on, but especially with roasted malt, you've completely obliterated the cellular structure of that product. It's going to age fast.
Truly.
Okay.
And if we're all concerned at home with the coffee, like I put it in the airtight container and whatever, and I want it to be, and
But with
I
roasted
go
malt,
and
not
get
so
it.
much.
You'll
And then
have
roasted malt.
half a bag
Bags,
rolled up on a
yeah.
count, in a shelf, like in the back of your brewery for a year. Like,
We do have
And you know
now a
who-
sealer. So.
You know who preaches your chocolate malt is Cy.
oh yeah.
Loves it.
Well, the
Who's that?
freshness.
Si's
Si's
a friend
the
of
head
ours
brewer
who's
at
a brewer at a
Timnath.
local brewery called Timnath.
See, I'm always just got to make sure people that are listening
They
know
would
what's
talk
going
about
on.
Yeah.
I'm
Timnath
on
Beer
it.
Works. Timnath Beer Works. Go visit when you
No,
come
we've
visit
done
Northern
actually
Colorado.
tasting studies, like with legit sensory panel certified PhDs.
UC Davis.
Anyway,
I know him.
But
yeah.
you,
Charlie
Malt-
Banforth, I had him on the
Banforth,
podcast. No big deal.
Charlie?
course you
You call him
did.
Charlie,
Yeah.
not Charles.
Last second fill-in. I was like, Charlie's in Davis. I'll hit him up. He's like, I love those guys.
We got Charlie
Came
Paparazzi into
over.
the malt house.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
Haven't gotten him yet.
But the malt
guarded.
ages, and we've done tests where if you were to have freshly malted malt, and then wait a month, and we make malt teas. So we just put in a little bit of hot steep water and taste it. If you put it under a trained tasting paddle, they taste the difference.
Right.
In
a
fresh
month.
Yeah, within 1 month.
For base malts.
Roasted malt, I mean,
it's like a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And you'll see and that's the thing, is like if you can use a fresh roasted chocolate and you actually get chocolate and coffee and violet and even a little herbaceousness from it, then you can simplify your malt bill but have a more complex flavor profile for that stout. So we're really adamant. This last year was awesome for us for dark beers in pushing the roasts. We did a lot of really cool beers. We even had one brewer, Oscar Blues, did a fresh roast stout, actually marketed it as
nice.
fresh roast, and I think it probably went over people's heads, but
Yes.
it's one of
But
those
it'll
slow
get there.
kind of build kind of things.
Because fresh hop was also a hard thing to sell
Exactly.
initially. So just get the fresh
But you
roast.
1,000% can taste the difference. And
And the coffee people, anyway, which is everybody
yeah.
who drinks coffee, if they say fresh roast, it sounds better for some reason,
Yeah.
and they know. And if it's
exactly.
true,
It's
which
a
it is with
marketable
these guys,
term, no matter if you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
taste the difference or not. But craft specialty is all about a noticeable, tasteable difference.
Right.
And this is one of those things where
there is.
you drink that and
you're like,
it's
okay.
a different beer.
Yeah.
And you have this whole three-dimensional scope of flavor from that fresh roasted malt. And not only that, one of the things that we discovered in approaching our roasted platform was that a lot of commercial malt roasters add water to the end of their roasts to quench the smoke, but also to add weight back to the product. So not only have you obliterated the cellular structure of the malt, but now you've turbo injected oxygen into it.
Yeah, right. Which
So that it ages
faster.
even faster.
Yeah, right.
Speak it into existence, and it shall be.
Yes. Thank you,
Smell it
Carol.
first.
So this is Sad Panda Coffee Stout. It's our largest brand for sure, and it's like Carol said. I mean, it's
That smells delicious.
But Sad Panda is
Yeah.
a great beer to talk about just because it is a year-round coffee stout. This beer, and it's a handle at every restaurant or bar, not just in town, but you go across Colorado, you'll see Sad Panda. And Luke Margam has been a great evangelist for this beer.
Yeah, and that name, you want to know what's going on with Sad Panda.
That's a great name.
So there's a brewery in my area, Drake's. They have a beer
totally. Yeah,
called
Drake's.
They had a beer. It's called Foraging Raccoon. Obviously, you want to know
try
what
it.
that was. Yeah.
And
so,
it's a pastry something, right?
no, it's an IPA.
Which, by the way, isn't a raccoon called some kind of panda? Like
Trash
a trash
panda.
panda.
Trash Panda, yeah. So I was talking about it, I'm like, you want to order that beer, obviously. There's a Rubicon had Monkey Knife Fight. You want to know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But he said they'd made the beer as a 7% beer with 70 IBU, so they had a 7 and 7 was what they were going for, and it just never
nice.
sold. And he's like,
They renamed it.
and so we renamed it Foraging Raccoon. And it's their best-selling beer.
Yeah.
He's like, we came up with it because in our minds, it was comparable to Ballast Point Sculpin. And so we started researching what's its natural predator, and it was a foraging raccoon.
That's incredible. That's an incredible
So he's like, to us,
marketing
this is our Sculpin killer.
Killer, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But you see that, you're like, I'm going to drink that. I'm going to drink that. If I saw Sad Panda, I just saw it on a shirt, I'm like, that could be anything.
But this is one of the most recognizable beers in town, for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. Obviously, it's also wonderful.
No,
It's
Lindsay, not only, she was our first brewer. She not only developed it and perfected it, but she also named it. She said she had dogs, and so she's like, well, when they walk in, you have all these. It was 6 or 7 different animal characteristics, who's being a flighty finch now? And then what are the other ones? Agitated aardvark. Oh no, agitated aardvark. And then she's like, oh, who's a sad panda? So that was.
It's in the vernacular. Sad Panda is like what you call somebody who's being sad. Oh, who's
There
a
you
sad
go.
panda?
See?
But if
Thank
you
Ben.
can
Thank you,
produce
yeah.
a dark beer that you can get year round and will be ordered year round by businesses,
Growing
Well, so
in
this is
ordered
one of
year
the
round
things
by
that,
consumers, that's huge.
So Tim wanted a light-bodied stout. He's like, I want a stout that I can drink in the middle of summer. This is what his first conversation with Lindsay was about.
And she's like,
I
think I know
have
what you want.
the thing in
but
mind.
really,
you
the
know?
base beer was the one
Yeah.
that I really loved. And this is, honestly, I like Sad Panda as well, but the base beer was amazing. And we do use more than 10% Troubadour malts in this. So that, we've.
Thank you.
No, but the best is I'm now even more convinced that we should do that when these guys drive up in their Scion or Subaru and unload the malt.
Or the forklift.
Or the forklift, they drive the forklift over. And
it's only 2 blocks.
With a half pallet, and then Tanner grains in that next morning. I mean, it's fresh. So I'm feeling better about that because we're in a just-in-time system because we have no warehouse space.
Yeah.
Welcome to small businesses.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to come visit, you can see how we have no warehouse.
Yes.
Ben
Very true.
Cannavale.
Pen confirm.
But some people come in here and go, "You guys have so much space."
We had cans. We had Horse and Dragon.
You bet they were
in our warehouse.
right. That Troubadour was
Until we ran out of room.
when we first started. That was early COVID, right?
Yeah. Just before,
So we got shipments.
Yeah,
And we're like,
stack
we
up
have
the cans.
too many pallets of cans. Can we borrow some of your space? And that was when you guys are expanding. You're like, for like 5 minutes you can. And then, sorry, you got to move because we're going to be.
It's like, this is going to be your next run. Your next run, you come over here.
But it was very convenient for both of us.
But Horse and Dragon has been stalwart supporters and champions of craft malt. You know, not just us, but other craft malt producers in the area. But our craft malt certified brewery and are really great at translating that story and the importance of it and putting it into their beers. You know, like the fact that every one of their packaged beers has, you know, a percentage of locally grown malts is huge.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's also really important, like that craft malt and what we do at Troubadour, we can offer something that's really layered and beautiful and has a lot of nuance to it, but it's also not about just flipping a switch and saying now everything you use is craft malt. That wasn't our purpose, was to say we're going to replace all your other suppliers. It's just about creating diversity in the supply chain and a conversation in that supply chain as well. Like, just because you're buying some malt from us, maybe the relationship that you have with us inspires the brewer or that business to then, hey, we should reach out to this other business that even though they're a bigger business, like we should know more about what they're doing. And, you know, that's, again, maybe one of those pie in the sky, rose-colored glasses kind of things. But
you got to start somewhere.
In general, malt was one of those things in beer that nobody was paying attention to, and it's so important to the beer.
Oh my
gosh,
gosh,
it's secondary.
It is the backbone, as you say.
Yeah.
And it's not more important or less important. Like, I'm really a firm believer in terms of the thing you pay the least amount of attention to is the thing that's going to cut you out at the lake.
Like, honestly, yeast. Let's face that. Yeast is the thing that nobody's ever discussed, even though it's like, it does all the work. But
we actually have multiple independent yeast labs here in Colorado.
And Charlie Gilded Goat just did open fermentation, right?
Yeah.
Like, so they're talk about terroir.
Open it up, baby.
And,
Wild
you know,
yeast.
Primitive down in Longmont, Brandon and Lisa are doing all method traditional spawn beers and using all 100% local grains. And it would be a really hard case study to prove.
So truly, only beer you can get here.
Truly. But it's you know, there's an argument if you're making, you know, wild fermentation beers, if you're using local grains, that's a food source that those bugs already recognize and are going to be even more active and happy about. So
this is the non-scientific approach.
Yeah,
those bugs will be happy, and I'm with you. I totally agree with that. They've seen it before. They probably talked to it, and then they experienced it again. It's awesome.
Have you been out to Admiral Maltings?
I was going to bring it up because Admiral Malting has a tap house where they display their beers that feature their malts. Do you guys have something like that?
We don't.
Is there a Colorado issue?
Besides Horse and Dragon.
We got signs everywhere.
But
we want to tap at your.
But yes, we do have, and we do because, like we were mentioning earlier, the Beer and Bikes tour. They go and do a lot of brewhouse tours, which everybody's done. You know, anybody who's signing up for a brewhouse tour has done at least a handful of brewhouse tours before.
Yeah.
But Bob always brings the group through the malt house. And it blows everybody's mind.
It's amazing.
And even if it's only like 4 or 5 people at a time, that's 4 or 5 people who every other brewery they go on from now on is going to say, where do you get your malts from?
Right.
And that's huge.
Yeah. So Admiral, I did a tour with him because I went down there. I went to go do a pickup with a brewery, Tilted Mash, who I work with. I do a comedy show every month. We're coming back end of May. All right. May 27th. Look out for it. It's an anniversary show, so it's going to be crazy. They gave me a big budget budget. We're gonna go nuts. So check it out. May 27th. Is that the Thursday? Whatever the Thursday is.
It's Carol's birthday, so she'll be happy.
It is my birthday.
But yeah, I went there. And it was great. But here's the worst. So when COVID hit, so every year I do one video episode, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to go, like, I did Sierra Nevada for episode 100, which was awesome.
Yeah, cool.
And I was like, I did that in segments. I'm like, we're going to start in the brew house, that's the past. We're going to go to the fields, that's the present. And we're going to, like, the tasting room, and that'll be the future.
Nice.
We'll
Did
do
you say the
segments.
fields?
Yeah,
fields.
they have hop
Love it.
fields
Love it.
And barley out there, yeah.
Yeah, it was
They're
so
vertically-
hot.
been,
they're
like,
vertically
huge on
integrated.
That segment was
They're
like
a little
4
bit
minutes
larger
long
than
because
we
our
are.
equipment was burning up. But
Oh yeah.
but yeah, it was so fun. I got Judy Ashworth, who's like
Yeah.
a beer. Do you guys know Judy Ashworth? She's like the first craft beer bar in America. There's
Nice.
like I'm kicking all the big brands out. They will never be in my bar.
Nice.
She's in the California Hall of Fame. She's a fucking badass. And I was like, I
to
spent
know
so
her.
much time trying to find somebody who could contact. I'm like, I friended her on Facebook. I did it on Instagram. Like, I'm doing all the things I can. But she's not in beer anymore. She's like retired. So like,
wow.
you can't. There's no website
She's
with a
still in
contact.
She's drinking a bunch of
Oh,
Coors.
she's
drinking beer.
she's
Is
all
she not?
around.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
still at every event. It's
Oh.
nuts.
Love it. Love it.
So I'm just like calling in all these favors, like who can get me in contact with this person? And this person's like, oh, I'm going to visit her on Saturday. I'm like, can you put in a word that I'm trying to reach her to do this thing? And so the next Monday, so I'm like, hey, did you talk to you? Oh, I forgot. And so I'm like, and so I'm at this, like, I'm dead at nothing. Like, I'm at a random day at a bar. I'm at a brewery, and I'm just like taking a beer, and I'm talking to this guy, who I've met through beer, and I'm like, I'm working on Sierra Nevada, but I really want Judy Ashworth. That's like that's
Right.
my guest. That's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
big get. And he's like, oh, my wife works with her daughter. I got you. And so like I'm driving in the road one day, and
get
this
a
number
phone
pops
call.
up that I don't recognize.
You still answer it?
And I still answered it, and I'm like,
And it was
she's
a
like, hey,
car
this is
warranty,
Judy
but
Ashworth.
you waited for the next call. And
And then I missed the call.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so
creepy
part of our
dude.
origin story, was
That's
that,
awesome.
So we have been coming here forever. My grandparents worked for CSU.
Fort Collins.
That was
Like,
Scott
we have
Mills, for the record. Okay.
Nice.
All the people who say they can connect you, and then who
do.
does?
Scott Mills.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Scott.
Scott Mills.
A guy I know he's at every brewery all the time. But anyway, Admiral Malting. I was going to do an episode with them and Almanac Brewing, who's right
yes.
next door.
Right
Like,
next door.
Tanner went there.
For
Our
my-
Tanner.
Totally.
Yeah.
For my video episode, I was like, great, we can do brew house, malting house,
Yeah.
and then like out on the patio,
pepper, yeah.
boom, 3 parts. We've nailed it. And then COVID hit, and we're like, cancel
man.
it. And we're like,
They'll totally
let's
bring
hang
it
out.
back
Let's see what's happening. Let's see what's happening. And I'm like, I think we have to call it. I think we have to say that this can't happen. Like, I
Gotta
think
reschedule.
once I'm like, I know we're good, I'll be like, hey, where are you guys at on your vaccines? Let's do this video.
Ron and Steve went to the Canadian Malt Barley Technical Institute intensive
Nice.
class together right before they were starting, and Curtis and that whole crew out there, they're awesome. We really
Yeah.
love those guys.
Yeah.
Funny ways to like do some cross country fermented malts to like once COVID is gone to like drive malts across the country and.
Crazy Vegemite.
Opposite
Exactly.
of freshness.
Yeah, well, but we'll get something from it.
But community, yeah.
I trust you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the clap, maybe something.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
So-
don't know.
Tucker works at Almanac. Tucker Bush, who's
Tucker,
here.
right.
Yeah, who's
I
here.
said
Yeah.
Tanner, but I
Almanac.
should have said Tucker. Yeah,
Oh,
he's at
that's
Almanac.
He's at Almanac now.
Oh, super cool.
He's a brewer
Good
there.
for
Yeah.
Tucker. Yeah. But it will
Yeah.
be groundbreaking in beer podcasting.
Right.
But it's not like you're completely like doing something out of left field.
I don't even know what episode I'm on anymore because my episodes are when I'm talking to a brewer and somebody that's a creative type or like secondary market of the brewing industry that people kind of forget about, like malting or hop brewers or whatever. But like with quarantine, people are like, I'm like, hey, just so you know, brewers are like struggling to survive, so I don't want to be like, hey, give me an hour and a half of your time for no reason. So I started doing like offshoots. I do beer movie reviews.
Oh, good,
I've
yeah.
got a
Yeah, I saw
basketball.
that. Like you had
hoops.
some pairings and stuff.
Yeah, and then hoops and hops, which is like basketball
Nice.
and beer. So we compared players to
Man, what
beers and
happened to
stuff.
your Kings this year, man? They like
What happened?
they should have been
15 years of
I was gonna
garbage.
say,
right now?
they're-
Check out Please Dunk. It's now been rebranded. Please Dunk Responsibly, which is its own separate podcast.
But I'll thank you all day for Mike Malone.
I was just saying that dude
Coming
is
to the-
amazing.
Oh,
Yeah, you're welcome. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I could not be madder. I could not. It was the first time they'd won in like a decade. And then DeMarcus Cousins got hurt. And he's like,
And then
and they're like, we're losing without our best
must be the
players.
coach.
It must be the coach. Who the best players like, this is the best coach I've ever played for.
No,
I
he's
would
a
love to
stud.
keep playing.
No,
Like,
Malone's
No,
been
he
fire
brought,
for
he brought
Nuggets.
the
Yeah.
brought the Nuggets into
But you
into
guys-
the conversation because
I think the Nuggets get a bad rap because they haven't won. But
It's great,
consistent.
Watch out.
Like they're like
Yeah, watch out.
they're like
They're all like 20 years
Hold on, let me
old.
tell you this. I'm just going to say
Oh, yeah,
it
you go.
because
You
I'm
go.
a basketball
Say it,
guy.
say it.
So people are like, "Oh, the Jazz are consistent. The Spurs are consistent. The Nuggets are consistent."
Yeah.
Yes.
They're just
Since
Now they are.
this
like
kinda
81,
consistent.
like
They're
since
this kinda
81,
They've been
find
good.
how many losing seasons they had since 81.
yeah.
What is it,
Not
like
that many.
3?
Yeah. But
Hey,
they're not.
man,
But they're
you
better.
are our
Great.
guy.
But honestly,
Like, just don't bring up Paul, like, Westhead.
but
I just
Oh,
want to
fine.
say
I'll
that
leave
you
it
should
alone.
probably move
Malone.
to, you should
Malone
probably
has brought
move
us
to
into
Denver
it.
or Fort Collins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Malone has brought
That's
us
fine.
into
Look, I just
really
bought a house.
consistently
That's the
better.
But you could sell that for $1 billion and move
But the
here.
Aaron Gordon trade, these Nuggets
dude.
look so complete.
Yeah.
They just,
Dude.
like, they're
And
so, they were
he's
already
all
fun
in.
to
That's so
watch.
good for you guys.
But that first unit is just, like,
And Aaron
insane.
Gordon's all in. He's like,
Yeah.
But, like,
He's
I'll
gonna
be a
start
role
to fight.
player.
Fox and Bobby Hield, like, Zach has a team.
Get rid of Buddy Hield. Get him out of there. He's a terrible defender. He's one of
Yeah.
the worst defenders in the league.
right.
Get him out.
Dude.
I don't care how many threes he makes. Oh, I'm leading the league in shots. Who cares? Get him out.
Right.
So 3-point shots. Just so.
Yeah, I know.
But
Or
so
maybe
he-
shots, too.
But
Yeah.
take it back,
Yeah.
or possibly
but what he
shots
gives
too,
back
yeah.
on the defensive end is so negative. You're
Okay,
just
but
like,
I
get
will
him
say,
out.
like the NBA,
They should have been meaner in the West this year. I really expected them
dude,
to, like,
why? What's your problem? The
But
Nuggets
Tyrese
have to
Halliburton's
perform.
killing
They're
it.
in.
If you guys aren't on the Tyrese Halliburton train, get on it. That
Yeah.
guy's the real deal.
Yeah.
Like that's the
See-
best player we've had
see?
since DeMarcus, and he's probably better than DeMarcus. He's better than Tyreek Evans. Who
But
when I
is he
watch
by
Tyreek,
himself, though?
But he's a rookie,
he's
right?
alone. It's
Tyreek
the
Hill
Aaron
never,
Fox.
or something?
like, matched what he was supposed to. Like, his, and I was a huge, I was living in Chicago and D Rose came on. So
Okay.
it's like, I was watching Tyreek at Memphis,
Derrick Rose. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I watch Tyreek, I don't really watch college basketball because to me, college sports has such a it's such a wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
You
Variety.
can, as long as you're like the best player, you're clearly the best, and there's such a small difference between the best and the worst player
Especially
in the NBA. Yeah, and like football especially.
But
I
dude,
think
it
when
used
you have
to
a
be the
great
NBA
receiver
had
and
no
a bad
defense
cornerback,
at
it's
all.
game over. But
I used to love
if they have a
college
good
basketball
coach.
compared
Yeah.
to NBA because used to be
There's a purity.
honestly not too long ago, 6 years ago,
You
no
never know.
defense, zero defense,
Zero
Like,
defense.
It's all
In the
zone,
NBA.
all
It's all
In the
zone.
NBA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But,
But
now
now-
it's getting better in the
Yeah.
NBA.
Yeah,
Right.
because you get
So
some
I used to
Europeans.
love college basketball
Oh,
because
there
I'm
you
like,
go.
look, they're playing both sides of the court.
Right. But I remember watching Tyreek at Memphis and be like, this guy looks like a basketball player. He looks like. And
Yeah.
He's bigger than D Rose.
Yeah,
He,
and,
could
and
move in.
look, we tackled it in episode 1. Why did the Kings fail with DeMarcus Cousins and Tyreek Evans? It's
Yeah.
because they felt like they needed to overload one side. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, Tyreek is not a shooter. He's a driver.
No,
If
he's
you're
a
going to put a
driver.
big
So you have to
280-pound guy in the way, he's not going to be as effective. Put him on the other. Put
All those
Ty-
Memphis
split it
guards
up.
are that's Will Barton with us now.
Give it to Tyreek and put DeMarcus on the weak side,
meant to
and
be
you're
together.
cleaning up. I'm like, look, it's a different. Here's the thing, like to bring it to beer because this is how the beer podcast works.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like what we have done is we've put DeMarcus on the post on the same side as Tyreek, and we're basically just putting everything into
So
one
defense
basket.
can- yeah.
So you're making a
Three
milkshake
guys.
IPA.
Danger.
Oh,
You're making a milkshake IPA. When you put them on the other side, you've got a beautiful sour. You've got the separation.
balance.
They do what they want to do. I'm like, look, I don't want a milkshake. I want a sour. And if you just do that, you would have it. So that's my pitch for Believes Drunk Responsibly. I know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I don't want.
On both
I
sides
don't want a
of the
milkshake.
game, yeah.
IPA
Well, Steve and I initially bonded over basketball passions. That's
Yeah.
why we
No, the Nugs are
started
solid.
hanging
They're,
out.
I mean,
they're so
especially
good.
now.
Are you guys in the same
I
neighborhood?
can't
How'd you
believe
really
the
meet?
Nuggets actually
Grade
traded
school.
for somebody
Yeah.
amazing, and
Yeah,
he's in.
and he's in because he's
Not
he's
in
struggling
Malone,
so long.
but our
Austin
kids.
Malone's a great
And then
coach, right?
Emily,
Jeez, if they
sister
even a
was
couple of years ago,
Sarah's,
they were kind of like
how did
everything.
teacher.
So, question.
His sister-in-law was.
Well, we're going to have
Sarah's
so many conversations. How did you guys feel about George Carl?
I like George Carl.
Yeah, he's okay. He's
but
approachable. He's on the
1,000
radio
wins.
now.
1,000 wins because I'm a Sonics fan. That's where I
yeah.
started.
Oh,
so
yeah.
George
Yeah,
Carl's
grew
my
up in-
fucking
yeah,
guy.
he-
I was
Washington,
Seattle
yeah.
boy. I grew up.
Yeah. How did you feel about the Thunder thing happening?
Oh, that was highway robbery.
Yeah. So here's what happened. I'm in Sacramento, right? I'm devastated as a Sonics fan. One of my friends had a friend who worked at the box office for the Kings, so I managed to get like a really good deal on like really good seats.
Nice.
So I was like 6-7 rows back
Oh, nice.
on a Kings Thunder game year 2. So I had 1 year to grieve. Second year, I go. Clay Bennett is at the game, and he's in shouting distance. So I just screamed at him. I mean, he didn't care. He probably didn't even hear me. But I'm like,
And people around you
I'm
knew
like-
that you were standing up.
yeah, I'm like, I got my words in, and You know,
I feel
the
validated.
players had no choice in this. The players are harmless here. They had nothing to do with it. So I've released my energy into the world, and now I'm a
I
Thunder
think Seattle's
fan.
going to get a team here soon.
They almost got the Kings, and I was like, I was honestly like, that's fine.
Give it.
Carl's a great podcaster.
He is.
His
He's
podcast
he's
is
on
awesome.
radio too.
Yeah.
And he's so funny because it seems like he's drunk all the time, but I don't
So,
think he is. I think he just has a slur. He's like, that is amazing. And the analytics around him are great. Carl, he's like, well, yeah, but then they have the fourth guy in the post, and he's coming down on
His
he's
analytics
the third
are
guy off the
fun.
bench. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, watch his shit.
photogenic
Even though he
memories,
sounds like he's drunk.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's an asshole for like. But
If you had to be, I don't know.
but if you need to be an
Right.
NBA
Like,
coach,
he
you kind of have to be.
Can I suggest
converted,
that
you're right,
we
the
could drive
Sonics.
you all over to Gilded Goat?
Yeah, we need to go.
And you could start, and you could have this conversation in the car on the way over, and then
We'll let you
Right,
finish
we
it.
need to
Bring me
get
back.
out of here. That's a good
I
point.
will say, though, my one crazy story about Sacramento.
Okay.
Because I was a season ticket holder for the Denver Nuggets for many, many years.
Whoa, really?
And one day I got a
Big
phone
spender.
call. Big spender. I had the best cheap seats in the house.
Oh yeah, I have a friend that did that. Yeah.
Upper
One
level,
pole
front
and
row.
one,
Yeah.
nice.
one obstructed view.
One year that will be the Troubadour box.
We got I got a phone call one day that says, you want to see the Nuggets play on the road?
Hashtag goals.
Oh,
like,
right.
play on the
No, you
road.
told me this.
I'm like, what does that mean? Like, well, they have a 1-game road trip to Sacramento. We'll take you out there to see a game. Great.
What?
Yes, you got to fly on the plane.
On the team plane.
No. What?
I remember you telling me this. I was
And
like,
this was
what?
Sack with C-Web, right? And
Yeah.
Roddy?
Oh, that's like
when
the
they
good
were
old
good.
days,
Yeah,
as we call
the good
them.
old days. Yeah, yeah.
Like, the Nuggets didn't have a chance, right? But the best part of the whole experience.
And Wonder Bread. Yeah.
Nice.
Jay Williams. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, got you.
we,
That was his legit
White,
They were
nickname.
good.
White lightning, white chocolate.
a million nicknames. So the day of the game, so we fly out there and they take us around all these like Sacramento bars at night. It was fabulous. But the morning of the game, the teams have shoot around, right? And so like, you want to go to shoot around? I'm like, sure.
Yes, I do.
You're like, yes, when I came out here on the private plane.
They roll up the doors to Arco Arena. Back
You just
there.
walk in.
You just waltz in
And
like
I stepped out of the door of the bus onto the hardwood, and I sat on the scorer's table for an hour and watched it. I practiced. I heard the
like-
whole team strategy. It was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So cool, dude. That's the
That was-
Why on earth
best.
did you ever
But the
do
Nuggets-
Nuggets,
best.
that was Kmart and...
No, this is like pre.
Not even.
Was that
Pre-Kmart?
pre-Kmart?
So, are you
was this McDice?
McDice
Oh,
time?
McDice.
Oh, McDice
and
time is the
Van
best.
Exel.
Remember Avery
Oh my God,
Bradley?
that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
I know.
We did a whole thing on Nick Van Exel because if you
Nick
were
Van
a
Exel's- he's a
'90s
legend in
kid who
Nuggets.
didn't hike his socks up and like have a headband, you weren't a basketball fan. That's just not who
He's
you
a legend
are.
in Denver. Yeah.
Oh, he's a legend
Nick Van
everywhere.
Exel. If
That
you
dude,
mentioned like top 5
like-
well-known Nuggets, he's
yeah,
on the list for sure.
Like, yeah, if you Kiki Vanderwedge, it's a weird name, but okay, we'll leave it out there. But
but yeah.
But yeah,
Everybody
they tried to
hates
bring
Carmelo, but
everybody
at
tried to
least we
bring
know
like
him.
like Rod Strickland was like, we're bringing the playground to the court, and like Ray Ferralson, we're bringing the playground to the court.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
Nick Van
Nick Van
Exel
Exel was
brought
the
the
guy.
playground
He
to
was
the court.
tough. Yeah, he's like, I'll fight you. And
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Maybe we can do another podcast here.
It's a whole. Let's please dunk responsibly.
Please dunk responsibly. It's good. That's like a coffee donuts thing.
Yeah.
how we met.
Anyway, one of the things that we use for our hashtag is slide into our GMs because. You know, we always pitch like, what would be the trade? What would you, if you were an owner? What would you do? But it was actually a mistake. I meant to say slide into our DMs with recommendations, but I said GMs. I'm like, keep it. That's fucking kill it.
I'm telling you that. Yeah, the Nuggets showed up this time with their trade. That was amazing.
Connolly, I think I love. I mean, Jokic will be a
Joker's
forever
amazing.
like amazing pick.
He's my MVP pick for the year.
He's an
Nice.
Jokic
He's always
for
ours.
MVP. Hashtag
Always.
Jokic for MVP.
Yeah.
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 Oh yeah.
Jokic. And
Everybody else has strikes against him. Like they got hurt. Or
had-
their
But
team's
he's
loaded
only
with
had
stars.
like 20 triple doubles this
Oh,
year.
well, that's
The way
nothing.
he
As a Thunder
takes over
fan,
a
that's
game in the
nothing.
fourth quarter,
Yeah.
he's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Bring, come on.
Yeah, yeah, well,
Give us
yeah.
something.
Connolly's like made the right moves, like all the right.
That was a
picks.
smart ad.
But like
Both of those
development,
guys.
but like Malone's
Yeah.
been the perfect mix to
so
that.
good.
Every year we've
I'll
gotten
never get
further.
over it.
Michael Porter Jr. finally is showing up 3 years in.
I was going to say, I haven't
He's
heard
like
back
20.
from Charlie, so I was worried that we had to get you there because he says, we're ready whenever you release him.
Okay,
Nice.
perfect. But yeah, we should get out of here. I have a whole life to live. But
Really, thanks for coming.
Before we
Yeah,
go,
thank you so
I
much.
got to
It
do the
has
thing.
been such
I
a
got to do
pleasure.
the thing.
Yeah, do you think?
So where can people find you? How can they find out more about you? We'll start with Troubadour Maltings. Where can people find you? Learn
Yeah,
what you're
Troubadour
doing.
Maltings on OnlyFans. We're about a big no.
Yeah.
No, Troubadour Maltings are probably our most most of our activities on Instagram. We love a visual medium.
Yes.
We love telling a story that way, connecting with folks. Like that's where we're most likely out
What's
there.
that handle?
Troubadour Maltings.
Nailed it.
At Troubadour Maltings.
Plural.
Always, there's two U's in Troubadour and an S at the end.
Nice.
So here's the fun part. Horse and Dragon, where can people find you online? What are you guys up to?
Online, we're on Facebook and Instagram at Horse Dragon Brew. Sorry.
Every time. Nobody knows. The brewers never know. It's like brewing, brew
Runs it. Yeah.
brewing.
She still didn't know. It's Horse
If anyone out there has tips on how I should run it better, let me know.
No, don't. At Horse Dragon Brew.
Horse Dragon Brew. And we are supposed to be on Twitter on that also, but I never, ever use Twitter. I should, but I don't.
You should.
So that's where I live right now.
Only
They're complete different
politicians.
worlds.
But you can also find us both.
Stand-ups and politicians.
But you can find us both in Fort Collins, Colorado. And anyone who wants to visit, we would love to see you.
Absolutely.
And if you shoot us an email or a message on Instagram or Facebook,
Slide into our DMs.
We'll set you up with a tour both here and at Troubadour.
100%.
Yeah.
And the beer's pretty good. We didn't get into it. The beer's pretty good. And the Bomo, as we discussed, Mosaic, not my favorite hop. Crushed it.
I love the
Good,
way
right? He nailed
the
it.
Mosaic
Tanner did a
hit
great
in
job.
Yeah.
that was really nice.
It was
Tanner
very
did a great
nice.
job with that.
No green onion at all detectable.
All melon,
which I
super
love.
soft.
You give me a melon, I'm all in.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
If you send us an email at info@hdbrew.com, then we'll set up a tour. No worries. And we'll
And we'll
take you
just
to
throw it
Troubadour
out there
down the
that
street.
you're going to love every taster you try here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
if you want
the
to just
goal.
talk hoops, drink beer and talk hoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially during
Info
season.
at troubadourmaltings.com.
After
Ask us questions.
in 3 months, we'll be
tell you why
celebrating
you're wrong.
Jokic's first MVP award.
Yeah. He's got to be the front runner at this point with all the injuries
All the
and
other guys
all the
injured.
like
Harden
super
cannot
teams that are
be
failing.
the MVP.
I don't
with
think he
his
can.
hissy fit getting to Brooklyn. That's
To me,
ridiculous.
the MVP is that fat suit he wore. Man, to give that guy that MVP, that was brilliant.
You're going to have to split up this between
It's
your
a
two
whole
podcasts.
thing. It's a whole thing. Nope. This is just promotion because that podcast is doing poorly. So this is promotion for how good that podcast
Three
could be.
more people on there.
All right, we got to get out of here. Chris Schooley from
Yeah, man.
Malting, thank
Thank
you
you so much, Ben.
And Steve Clark
yes.
from Maltings, thank you so much. Tim Cochran, Horse and
Thanks,
Dragon.
Ben. Cheers.
And
Appreciate
Carol
it.
Cochran, thank you so much.
Absolutely our
And
pleasure.
you can find Barley Me wherever you get your podcast, Barley Me Pod on social media. You did it. Chugs for charity. I'm still doing them. We're skipping the other stuff. I do a lot of things. You know, I post about them. You're tired of them. Great. Thank you guys so much for doing this. That'll be
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
episode number whatever I choose
Not
because
125.
I'm doing
Not
so many. There's no
125.
way to know.
Feel good hit of the summer.
Malts, yes, Queens of Stone Age.
Why
Malts,
all matters.
Maltster's May, sometime in May. This is when this episode comes out. I don't know. Important thing. Thank you so much for listening. Get home safe.
Safe.
Yes.
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.